Montana Territory, April 1883, the wind screamed across the plains as the stagecoach rumbled into the tiny town of Dry Creek, its wheels sloshing through half-melted snow and mud. Kendra Bishop clutched her satchel tighter, eyes wide behind the dust-layered glass. She had never seen land so wide, sky so endless. It made her feel like a ghost, like she could disappear and no one would notice. She stepped down from the coach with stiff legs and a quiet heart. She saw him almost right away. The cowboy stood beside a bay gelding, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat shadowing his face. He had a worn duster and a rifle strapped over his saddle, but it was the stillness in his stance that caught her. The kind of stillness you only learned from solitude and loss. "You Kendra Bishop?" he asked, voice low, steady. She nodded. He offered a gloved hand. "Wesley Dalton." Kendra took it, her fingers smaller, colder. "So, you're the one who sent for me." Wesley looked at her for a long moment, then gave a short nod. "That's right." She had answered his letter 9 weeks ago, a mail-order bride ad written in plain, careful script. Widower, rancher, 2 children, needs help. Offers kindness, not romance. She had not come for love. She had come because she had nowhere else. Wesley helped her onto the horse behind him. She did not ask if there was room in the saddle for 2. She had learned not to ask questions that made men uncomfortable. They rode out of town in silence, the sky softening to lavender as the sun dipped behind the pines. The Dalton ranch sat low in the valley, a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from the chimney. 2 children ran out from the barn as they approached. "Josie, James?" Wesley called, and the children slowed, eyes wide, uncertain. Kendra slid down and offered a faint smile. The girl, maybe 7, clutched her younger brother's hand. He could not have been older than 5. "This is Miss Kendra," Wesley said, setting a steady hand on each child's shoulder. "She's going to be staying with us." Josie looked at her sharply. "Are you going to be our new mama?" Kendra blinked. I mean I'm here to help." Wesley's jaw tightened. "Let's go inside." The cabin smelled like wood smoke and stew. It was warm but bare, no curtains, no softness, just survival. Kendra unpacked her bag in the small room she would be sharing with Josie. The girl watched her like a hawk. "You don't have to try so hard," Josie said. "Papa doesn't like people who pretend." Kendra met her eyes. "I am not pretending." That night after dinner, Wesley showed her the chores list. "I will handle the stock and fence line. You can help with the children, cooking, maybe the chickens." She nodded. "All right." He looked at her a moment longer, then said, "You are not trapped here, Kendra. I said that in the letter. If this life is not what you want, the coach comes back through every Friday. You are free to go. Or stay." She nodded again, but her chest ached. That night, she sat by the fire long after the children had gone to bed. Her fingers curled around a mug of tea. Wesley came in from checking the barn, brushing snow from his shoulders. "You should sleep," he said. She looked up. "I know, She stood. "I will be gone in the morning." He did not flinch. "All right." But something in his voice made her pause. "I thought you would argue," she said. He met her gaze. "That is not how I was raised." She waited, but he said nothing more. Just walked past her, boots quiet on the wood floor. She rose before dawn. Packed her things. Wrote a note for Josie and James, explaining that she was sorry, but she was not what they needed. She stepped outside into the dark, the snow crunching underfoot. The stable door creaked open behind her. Wesley stood there, arms crossed, hat low. "You are free to go, Kendra, or stay." She swallowed hard. "I do not belong here," he nodded slowly. "Neither did I at first." She looked back toward the road. "Why did you send for me?" Wesley walked to the fence, leaned on it. "Because Josie stopped speaking for a while, because James still cries at night, because I needed help. But I did not want someone who would lie to them. I wanted someone who would try." Kendra's throat tightened. "I do not know how to be a mother." He looked at her. "You do not have to be. Just be kind." She stared at him in the pale light. His face was tired but honest. "I lost my wife 3 winters ago," he said. "She died delivering James. I buried her out on the North Ridge. Since then, I have been doing my best not to fall apart in front of them." Kendra stepped closer. "I know what it is like to lose things." He nodded once. Then maybe you understand why I do not beg people to stay. She looked back at the road again, but her feet did not move. Wesley opened the stable door wider. There is coffee on the stove. Come in if you want it. The door shut behind him. Kendra stood in the snow another minute, heart thudding. Then she turned, walked slowly back toward the light glowing through the cabin window. Inside, the children were just waking. The smell of coffee reached her before the warmth did. James peeked around the corner, rubbing his eyes. Did you already leave? He asked. She knelt beside him. No, I am still here. His arms wrapped tight around her neck. She froze, startled, then held him close. From the kitchen, Wesley watched them quietly, one hand wrapped around a chipped mug. His eyes met hers. She gave a small nod. He nodded back. And just like that, she stayed. The first time the sewing needle slipped and pricked her finger, Kendra barely noticed. She had been mending one of Josie's worn dresses by the hearth, but her thoughts had wandered to the hills outside, where Wesley had taken the children to check the creek traps. Her blood dotted the fabric, and she pressed her handkerchief to the spot, not sure whether to laugh or curse. She hadn't sewn anything in over a year. She rose and brought the dress to the washbasin, dabbing at the stain. The fabric was thin near the hem, frayed from use and a poor fit on a growing child. Kendra sighed and folded it carefully. She would repurpose the sleeves, maybe patch them into James's trousers, which were equally threadbare at the knees. Outside, the wind had quieted. The sky was wide and pale, and a pair of magpies hopped along the fence rail. She stepped out to the porch, arms crossed for warmth. The land stretched in every direction, quiet and dappled with snowmelt, and she felt the strange pull of it again, that silent, pressing vastness that didn't ask questions, only waited. When Wesley and the children returned, the boy was asleep in the saddle, wrapped in his father's old coat. Josie held the reins of a pony that looked too small for her pride but just right for her legs. You caught anything? Kendra asked, stepping down to meet them. 3 muskrats and a rabbit, Josie said. Papa says I can skin the rabbit myself. Wesley nodded once. She's steady with a blade. Kendra met his eyes. Will she be handling supper then? Josie grinned. Only if you can't cook. I can cook, Kendra said. Whether or not you'll like it is another matter. Inside, she cleaned the rabbit while Josie watched, chin propped on the table. Wesley had gone to the barn to salt the pelts, and James still slept, laid out on a pallet near the stove. Why did you come here, really? Josie asked, not accusing, just curious. Kendra didn't look up from her work. I needed a place where no one knew me. Did something bad happen? Yes, Kendra answered plainly, but it's not a story for children. Josie accepted that, though her gaze lingered. Later, while the stew simmered and the smell of thyme filled the cabin, Kendra stepped out to hang the rabbit's pelt. Wesley was oiling a saddle near the barn, sleeves rolled to the elbow. She stood a moment before approaching. I can take over that stitching you left on Josie's dress, she said. He didn't look up right away. You don't have to, I know, but I want to. He adjusted the stirrup leather. She's taken to you, that means something. Kendra hesitated. She's sharp. She'll notice if you get close to someone and then they leave again. I know what it does to a child, he said, then stood, brushing grit from his hands. I try not to promise things I can't keep. She watched him as he coiled the reins, his movements slow, deliberate. You haven't asked about my past. I figure it'll show itself when it needs to. That quiet steadiness in him unsettled her more than any question might have. She'd known men who needed to fill silence just to prove they mattered. Wesley wasn't one of them. That night, after the children had gone to bed, she found him outside, sharpening a draw knife by lantern light. She hesitated only a moment before stepping onto the porch. You don't sleep much, she said. I sleep enough. She leaned against the rail. When I was 15, I married a man twice my age. He worked in freight. We had a house near the river in Kansas. He drank. I lost a child. Then he died coughing blood. That's the short of it. Wesley nodded slowly, knife paused in his hand. I'm sorry. I don't want pity. You don't have it. They stood in the hush between breaths, the lantern throwing soft shadows. I like it here, she said after a while, but I don't know if that means I belong. Belonging's not something you find in a day, she looked at him. You ever think about marrying again? He set the knife down. I did once. Then I thought better of it. Because of the children. Because I didn't know how to ask for something without feeling like I was taking it. Her voice softened. You didn't take anything from me. He met her gaze, steady. You still have your name, your space. You chose to stay. She didn't answer, but when she turned to go back inside, she left the door open behind her. Wesley came in not long after. He banked the fire and moved quietly through the room, pausing near the stove where James stirred in his sleep. Kendra watched from the doorway of the children's room. You're good with them. I try not to give them reasons to be afraid. She studied his silhouette against the firelight. I think you're better than you think. He looked over at her. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. She could feel something shifting, not quick, not sudden, but sure as thaw. She said nothing more and returned to bed, the scent of wood smoke in her hair and the sound of his quiet footsteps behind her. Steady on the floorboards, by early May, the ice had gone out from the creek, and the meadows behind the Dalton ranch shifted from brittle brown to damp green. The mountains stayed snow-capped, but the valley floor came alive with bird call and the soft rustle of cottonwood leaves. Kendra spent more of her time outdoors, sleeves rolled, skirts pinned back, hands in the dirt. Josie followed her into the vegetable patch one morning, carrying a shallow tin pail. Papa says you're turning the soil better than he ever could. That's kind of him, Kendra said, kneeling near the row where lettuce would go. Though I think he just doesn't like stooping. Josie crouched beside her. He doesn't stoop for anyone. Kendra glanced sideways. No, except James, sometimes me, but not often. They worked in silence for a while, planting seeds in neat, shallow troughs. The girl's hands were small but quick, and she didn't flinch at worms or the occasional beetle hiding under the soil. Do you miss your home? Josie asked suddenly. Kendra pressed the earth down over a row. I don't think I ever had one. Everybody has a home. Maybe. But sometimes it's something you grow toward, not something you start with. Josie looked down at her hands. I think Papa's lonely. Kendra shook dirt from her palms and sat back on her heels. I think he's tired. He used to laugh more, Josie said, almost too quiet to hear. That evening, Wesley brought back a sack of flour and a bolt of calico from town. He set them on the table without comment, then removed his hat and coat, hanging them near the fire. Kendra was trimming a stew, knife steady against the cutting board. Supplies arrived late, he said. Had to wait while they unloaded the freight wagon. She wiped her hands on a cloth. Did you speak to the schoolmaster? He's still willing to teach Josie, but he's got more pupils now. Wants to hold lessons 3 days instead of 5. She'll make the most of it, he nodded, then paused near the stove. I saw Reverend Pritchard. Kendra looked up. He's still pressing you to come back to Sunday service? Wesley leaned against the hearth. He said I should find a way to set things right with the Lord. Kendra stirred the stew. And did you agree? I told him I'm doing what I can. They didn't speak for a while as the stew thickened and the fire settled low. Later, after James fell asleep with his cheek against a book and Josie curled up with her mending, Wesley stepped outside to check the livestock. Kendra followed him, pulling a shawl around her shoulders. The moon lit the pasture faintly, casting long shadows across the yard. He leaned on the gate, watching a pair of cows nose through the grass. I've been thinking, Kendra said. He didn't look at her. About leaving again? No, about staying if it's still a choice. Wesley exhaled slowly. It was always a choice. I want to earn my place, she said. Not just as a helper, as part of this. He turned toward her, the moonlight catching the line of his jaw. You already have. She stepped closer. Not completely, not yet. Wesley studied her face, then reached for her hand. His was warm, calloused, sure. I never wanted to tie someone down just to keep from being alone. You didn't, she said. I stayed because there's something in you I trust, he nodded once. Then I'll ask plain, would you marry me, Kendra? She didn't answer right away. The air smelled of sage and wood smoke, and her heart beat like a bird against her ribs. Yes, she said. I will. He didn't pull her in or kiss her then. He just stood beside her, hand in hers, the quiet between them deep and full. Inside, the cabin light glowed soft through the window. The land stretched beyond it, dark and familiar now. Kendra looked out across it and felt, for the first time in years, like she'd stopped running. Wesley held her hand a while longer, then said, "We'll tell the children in the morning." She nodded. "They'll want to be part of the wedding." "They already are." They walked back to the cabin together, side by side, the steps easy, the silence warm. By late June, the cottonwoods along the creek rustled with full-grown leaves, and the sun stretched longer across the valley each evening. The wedding was held under those trees one Sunday after supper, with Reverend Pritchard riding out from Dry Creek in his good wool coat, and a Bible wrapped in brown paper. Josie braided wildflowers into her own hair and insisted on brushing Kendra's until it shone. James wore a clean shirt and refused to sit still until Wesley hoisted him onto his shoulders. They stood beneath the branches, the four of them, with the Reverend speaking low and formal. Kendra's dress was plain but neatly fitted, made from the calico Wesley had brought back weeks before. She had sewn it by lamplight, and her fingers still bore the marks of that work. When the Reverend asked if she would take Wesley Dalton as her husband, she said, "Yes," clear and without hesitation. Josie clapped once before remembering herself and folding her hands again. James whispered, "Is that it?" and was hushed by his sister. Afterward, Wesley touched his forehead to Kendra's briefly, then turned to the children. "She's one of us now." They ate by lantern light on the porch cold roast chicken, beans, and a dried apple pie Kendra had baked that morning. The Reverend took his leave before dusk, tipping his hat as he rode out, and the sound of his horse faded down the road. When the dishes were cleared and the children sent to bed, Kendra stood at the edge of the porch, looking out toward the pasture. The wind carried the scent of clover and warm earth. Wesley joined her, his hand brushing hers, then settling over it. "You sure?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I've never been more." He leaned against the rail beside her. "I don't know what kind of man I'll be in 10 years. But I know I'll keep trying." "I don't need a man without flaws," she said. "I need one who doesn't hide from them." He looked out into the dark. "There's things I might never say right." "Then don't say them, show them." The lantern behind them flickered as the wind shifted. She turned to him, her hand still in his, and her voice softened. "You remember the first time you saw me, standing outside the stagecoach," he said. "You looked like a woman trying not to be seen." She let out a quiet breath. "And you looked like a man who'd stopped expecting anything good." He traced a calloused thumb across her knuckles. "You're not what I prayed for, but you're what I needed." She stepped closer, her forehead resting against his chest. "I'll never leave again. Not unless I'm carried." His arms wrapped around her, and for a long while they stood like that, with only the sound of the wind in the grass and the hush of night settling over the land. Inside, the fire dimmed, the house held its breath, and the home they had built quietly, piece by piece held strong by midsummer, the rhythm of the ranch had taken on a new shape. The days stretched hot and long, and the work came steady. Kendra rose early with Wesley, her hands as calloused now as his, though finer in their grip. She had taken to riding out with him when she could, especially when the cattle needed moving to higher grazing or a fence had buckled. Josie and James stayed with Mrs. Abernathy from the neighboring homestead on those days, their chores packed into baskets and their laughter trailing out behind the wagon. On a morning thick with heat and yellow light, Kendra rode beside Wesley past the northern ridge. The horses moved slow, hooves soft against the tall grass. He pointed out where a storm had dropped a cottonwood limb across the fence line, and she rode ahead to check the wire. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if you'd gone back east?" he asked without looking at her. She dismounted, crouching to inspect where the wire had snapped free. "I'd have found work in a laundry house, or maybe in a boarding kitchen. That's what women like me do. I don't see you inside 4 walls all day." "I didn't used to either," she said, pulling a length of coiled wire from the saddlebag. "But we don't always get the life we expect." He watched her hands, the way she twisted the loop tight, knuckles firm and precise. "You seem to have a better one now." She glanced up. "I do." That evening, after the children were put to bed and the horses watered, she found him behind the barn, oiling the hinges on the grain door. Fireflies blinked low in the grass, and the air smelled of dry earth and horse sweat. "I've been thinking about adding another room to the house," he said, brushing oil onto the iron pin. "Something with a window facing west." "For what?" she asked. "For you," he said. "You never asked for anything." "I didn't come here to ask. You deserve a space that's yours." She stepped closer, the lantern he'd hung swaying slightly in the warm breeze. "I don't need it to be mine, I just want it to be ours." Wesley set the oil can down, straightened. "You ever want to leave again to visit somewhere to find your people, I'll go with you." "I don't have people outside of this." "You've got me," he said. She reached for his shirt front, fingers curling there. "And you have me." He kissed her then, not with hunger but with finality, like a man sealing a vow he already lived by. Her hands found the back of his neck, and the space between them vanished into breath and skin, and the soft creak of barn wood behind them. The next day, they began clearing the corner of the cabin where the new room would go. Josie helped sort the salvaged boards, and James tried to carry nails in a coffee tin that clattered with each step. Kendra marked out the floor with chalk lines, her dress hem pinned up, and Wesley dug the first post hole by hand. By harvest, the room stood finished, one window set into the western wall just as he'd said. Kendra kept her sewing there and a narrow shelf for her books, some worn, some gifted by the schoolmaster in town. She took small commissions from nearby families, mending and stitching in exchange for flour or preserves. One evening as the sun slipped low, Kendra sat in that room, the window open, a breeze lifting the curtain she'd made from leftover muslin. Wesley leaned in the doorway, thumb hooked in his pocket. "Did I do right by you?" he asked. She looked up from her stitching. "You gave me a place to grow." "That's not an answer," she set her thread aside. "You did better than right, you gave me peace." He crossed the room, knelt beside her. "I didn't know if I could ever be enough for someone again." "You were never supposed to be enough," she said softly, pressing her fingers to his jaw. "You were supposed to be true." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the prairie grass. Inside, Wesley leaned into her hand, eyes closing briefly. The years that followed were quiet and full. Josie took to her books with a sharp mind and steady heart, and the schoolmaster made the trip out twice a week, rain or shine. James grew taller, surer, and followed Wesley across the land like a shadow in boots too big. Kendra planted a pear tree near the barn, and it bore its first fruit 3 summers later, a small harvest, but sweet. Wesley built a second barn with help from a neighbor, and they took on more cattle. They never hired hands, never needed to. Everything they had, they built themselves. One winter when Josie caught fever, Kendra sat by her bed for 4 straight nights, cool cloths and boiled willow bark close at hand. Wesley slept in the chair, boots still on, only waking when Kendra pressed a hand to his shoulder. Josie recovered, slower than they hoped, but whole. In spring, they added a porch swing and Kendra painted it the color of early lilacs. Wesley never said much about it, but he sat there with her most evenings, his hand resting over hers, content in the hush. They grew older together without noticing it much. Lines deepened around their eyes and their hands stiffened in the cold, but their steps still matched, and their laughter never faded. On the morning of their 10th wedding anniversary, Kendra rose early and baked bread while Wesley fed the stock. The children were nearly grown by then, Josie preparing to study under the schoolmaster herself and James already taller than her, all limbs and quiet strength. When Wesley came in, he found the table set, coffee steaming and Kendra waiting. He kissed her forehead. "You're still the best thing that's ever happened to me," she smiled, tucking a curl behind her ear. "And you're still the man I chose." Outside, the land stretched wide and golden, the wind soft through the cottonwoods. Inside, the house was full not of noise, but of the kind of peace that comes from long work, quiet trust, and a love that had taken root in hard ground and thrived. They stayed there, the four of them, through all the seasons that came after. Together. Always.